still remember the exact sound of their laughter, that sharp, cutting kind of laughter that makes your stomach turn and your face burn, the kind that echoes in your mind long after it stops. I was standing in the middle of the hospital cafeteria, wearing my scrubs that had seen better days, holding a tray with my lunch, and they were all staring at me, pointing, whispering, then laughing, out loud, right there, in front of everyone. My name is Sarah, and I've been a nurse for almost 15 years. 15 years of night shifts, double shifts, holidays away from my family, missed birthdays, and more tears than I can count. But nothing, absolutely nothing, prepared me for what happened that Tuesday afternoon in March. It was supposed to be just another regular day at County General Hospital. I had just finished a brutal 12-hour shift in the ICU, and all I wanted was to grab something to eat before heading home to sleep for a few hours, before my next shift started. My feet were killing me, my back was sore, and I was so tired I could barely think straight. But I was hungry, really hungry, so I dragged myself to the cafeteria. The cafeteria was packed, as it usually is around 2 in the afternoon. Doctors, nurses, administrative staff, visitors, everyone crammed into that space with its fluorescent lights and the smell of reheated food. I got in line, grabbed a sandwich and a coffee, paid, and turned around to find a place to sit. That's when I saw them. A group of 5 people sitting at a table near the window. 3 women and 2 men, all dressed in expensive clothes, the kind you see in magazines. Designer bags, perfect hair, manicured nails, tailored suits. They looked completely out of place in our rundown hospital cafeteria. I didn't think much of it at first. We get all kinds of people in the hospital. Rich, poor, famous, unknown. Disease doesn't discriminate, right? So I just walked past their table, looking for an empty seat. That's when I heard one of the women say something. Her voice was loud enough for me to hear, but quiet enough that she probably thought I wouldn't notice. She said something about my appearance, something about how I looked tired and messy, something about how nurses these days don't take care of themselves. I stopped walking. I turned around slowly and looked at her. She was probably in her early 40s, with blonde hair that was styled perfectly, wearing a cream-colored suit that probably cost more than my monthly rent. She was smiling at her friends, that smug kind of smile that told me she knew exactly what she was doing. The others at her table were giggling, covering their mouths with their hands like they were in high school. I should have just walked away. I should have ignored them and found my seat and eaten my sandwich in peace. But I was tired, so tired, and something inside me just snapped. I walked up to their table and asked if there was a problem. My voice was calm, but my hands were shaking. The blonde woman looked up at me with this expression of fake surprise, like she couldn't believe I had the audacity to speak to her. She looked me up and down, taking in my wrinkled scrubs, my worn-out shoes, my hair that was falling out of its ponytail, and she said, in front of everyone in that cafeteria, that it was sad to see healthcare workers who clearly didn't care about their appearance or their jobs. She said I looked like I had just rolled out of bed. She said patients deserved better than to be taken care of by someone who looked like they couldn't even take care of themselves. The cafeteria went quiet. Not completely silent, but quiet enough that I could feel people turning to look at us. Quiet enough that I knew everyone nearby had heard what she said. My face felt hot. My throat felt tight. I wanted to say something back, something smart and cutting, but all I could do was stand there, holding my tray, feeling smaller and smaller by the second. One of the men at her table laughed and said something about how nurses used to have more pride in their work back in the old days. Another woman chimed in, saying that maybe hospitals needed to have dress codes or something, because this was just unprofessional. They were all looking at me now, and they were all laughing. Not just smiling, but actually laughing. At me, at my appearance, at my exhaustion, at everything I had just been through during that shift. I felt tears starting to burn behind my eyes, and that made it worse because I knew if I cried right there in front of them, it would just prove whatever point they thought they were making. So I turned around and walked away. I didn't eat my sandwich. I threw it in the trash on my way out, along with my coffee, and I went to the locker room and sat on the bench and cried. I cried for probably 20 minutes. Ugly crying, the kind where you can't catch your breath and your whole body shakes. I felt humiliated, completely and utterly humiliated. Here I was, a dedicated nurse who had just spent 12 hours keeping people alive, being mocked for how I looked. Did they think I wanted to look tired? Did they think I enjoyed having bags under my eyes and wrinkled scrubs? Did they have any idea what those 12 hours had been like? Because let me tell you what those 12 hours had been like. Let me tell you what they didn't see when they looked at me with their judgmental eyes and their cruel laughter. I had started my shift at 2 a.m. 2 a.m. While they were probably sleeping in their comfortable beds, I was checking on patients, administering medications, monitoring vital signs, responding to emergencies. At around 4 a.m, we had a patient go into cardiac arrest. I was part of the team that performed CPR for 45 minutes. 45 minutes of chest compressions, of shouting orders, of desperately trying to bring someone back. We succeeded, thankfully, but it left me physically and emotionally drained. Then at 6 a.m., I had to comfort a family who had just lost their mother. I held the daughter's hand while she sobbed. I got her tissues. I called the chaplain. I stayed with them even though I had 10 other patients to check on because that's what you do. That's what being a nurse means. At 8 a.m., I had to clean up a patient who had gotten sick all over himself. I changed his sheets, gave him a bath, made him comfortable, all while he apologized over and over, embarrassed. And I kept telling him it was okay, that he didn't need to apologize, that this was my job, and I was happy to help him. At 10 a.m., I had to start an IV on a patient with terrible veins. It took me 5 tries, and each time I felt worse and worse because I was hurting her, even though I was trying my best. At noon, I had to deal with a doctor who was in a bad mood and took it out on me, yelling at me in front of other staff because I had supposedly not relayed a message quickly enough, even though I had done exactly what I was supposed to do. And then, after all of that, after 12 hours of giving everything I had, I went to get some food and got mocked for looking tired. I sat in that locker room for a long time, trying to pull myself together. I thought about quitting. I seriously thought about it. I thought about how maybe they were right. Maybe I wasn't cut out for this anymore. Maybe I should just find a different job where people didn't treat me like I was invisible or worthless. But then I thought about my patients, the ones who held my hand and called me an angel, the ones who wrote thank you cards, the ones who remembered my name months later when they saw me in the grocery store, the ones whose lives I had helped save. I washed my face, fixed my hair as best as I could, and decided I wasn't going to let those people break me. I had 3 days off after that shift, and I spent most of that time trying to forget what had happened. But I couldn't. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw their faces. I heard their laughter. I felt that burning shame all over again. When I came back for my next shift, I was nervous. I was afraid I might see them again, afraid of another confrontation, afraid of feeling that small again. But I also felt something else. I felt angry. Not a hot, explosive anger, but a cold, determined kind of anger. The kind that makes you stand up straighter. The kind that makes you look people in the eye. My shift started at 7 in the evening. It was a Friday night, which meant the ER was going to be busy. Friday nights are always chaos in a hospital. Accidents, fights, people who had been putting off medical care all week and suddenly couldn't wait any longer. I checked in with the charge nurse, got my assignment, and started my rounds. Everything was normal at first. Busy, stressful, but normal. Then around 9 p.m. I heard a commotion in the ER. Raised voices, people moving quickly, that particular energy that means something serious is happening. I was on the 4th floor, but I could hear the sirens getting closer, could hear the overhead announcement calling for additional staff to the ER. I wasn't scheduled for the ER that night, but when they call for help, you go. That's the rule. So I headed downstairs. The ER was packed. Every bed was full. People in the waiting room. Family members hovering in hallways. I checked in with the ER charge nurse, and she pointed me toward a trauma bay where they were bringing in a patient from a car accident. Serious injuries, she said. We need all hands on deck. I nodded and headed that way, mentally preparing myself for whatever I was about to see. I pushed through the doors of the trauma bay just as the paramedics were wheeling in the stretcher. There was blood everywhere. The patient was unconscious, and from what I could hear the paramedics saying to the doctor, it was bad, really bad. Head trauma, internal bleeding, broken bones. They had been in a head-on collision, and it was going to take everything we had to stabilize them. I jumped in immediately, doing what I had been trained to do, starting IVs, drawing blood, cutting away clothing, monitoring vitals, recording everything the doctor was saying. It was controlled chaos. The kind that looks like confusion to an outsider, but is actually a carefully choreographed dance that we've all done 100 times before. Everyone knew their role. Everyone moved with purpose. It wasn't until about 10 minutes into the resuscitation that I actually looked at the patient's face. And when I did, my heart stopped. I recognized her. It was the blonde woman from the cafeteria. The one who had mocked me. The one who had laughed at my appearance and said I didn't care about my job. She was lying on that table, unconscious, bleeding, broken, and I was one of the people trying to save her life. For a split second, I froze. Just for a second. 1,000 thoughts ran through my mind. Part of me wanted to step back, to let someone else handle this, to say I couldn't do it. Part of me remembered how she had made me feel, how small and worthless and humiliated. But then my training kicked in. My professionalism kicked in. Everything I believed in as a nurse kicked in. Because here's the thing about being a healthcare worker that people don't understand until they're in our shoes. We don't get to choose who we help. We don't get to decide who deserves our care, based on whether they've been nice to us. Every single person who comes through those doors deserves our best effort, our full attention, our compassion. Every single one. So I pushed aside every feeling I had and I did my job. I did it better than I had ever done it before. I was focused, efficient, calm. I anticipated what the doctor needed before he asked for it. I caught a change in her vital signs before the monitor even alarmed. I was gentle when I placed the IVs, even though my hands remembered how her laughter had made them shake days before. We worked on her for over an hour. It was touch and go several times. There were moments when I thought we were going to lose her. But slowly, gradually, we stabilized her. We got her blood pressure up, stopped the bleeding, got her ready for emergency surgery. As they were wheeling her toward the operating room, I saw her family in the hallway. The same people who had been sitting at that table with her. The same people who had laughed at me. They looked terrified. One of the women was crying. One of the men was on the phone, his voice shaking. They didn't recognize me at first. Why would they? I was just another nurse in scrubs, one of many rushing around the ER that night. But then one of them, the woman who had said something about nurses not having pride anymore, looked at me, really looked at me, and I saw the recognition dawn in her eyes. She turned pale. She opened her mouth like she wanted to say something, but no words came out. I just looked at her, my face neutral, professional. I could have said something cutting. I could have reminded her of what she had said to me. I could have made her feel as small as she had made me feel. But I didn't. Instead, I told her the truth. I told her that her friend was critical but stable, that she was going into surgery, that the next few hours would be crucial, but that she was in good hands. I told her where the surgical waiting room was. I told her that someone would come update them as soon as there was news. She stared at me with tears streaming down her face, and then she whispered, "Thank you." Just those 2 words, but they carried so much weight, so much understanding, so much shame. I nodded and turned to go back to work, because there were other patients who needed me. But before I could walk away, she grabbed my arm, gently but urgently. She said she remembered me from the cafeteria. She said she was so sorry. She said she didn't know, couldn't have known, and now she understood. I looked at her for a moment, and I could see she meant it. I could see the guilt and the fear and the realization of how wrong she had been. I told her that I knew she was sorry, and that it was okay. I told her that I hoped her friend would be okay. And then I said something that I had been thinking about ever since that day in the cafeteria. I said that maybe next time, before judging someone based on how they look, she might want to consider what they might have been through, what battles they might be fighting, what lives they might be saving. I said it quietly, without anger, just as a statement of fact. She nodded, unable to speak, tears still falling. Her friends had gathered around her now, and they were all looking at me with those same expressions: shame, guilt, understanding. One of the men stepped forward and apologized too. He said they had been thoughtless and cruel, and that watching me work, seeing how professional and skilled and compassionate I was, had made him realize how wrong they had been. I accepted their apologies, because what else could I do? I wasn't going to hold on to anger and bitterness. That's not who I am. But I also wanted them to learn something from this. So I told them about my shift that day, The day they saw me in the cafeteria, I told them about the cardiac arrest at 4 a.m., about comforting the grieving family, about cleaning the patient who was embarrassed, about the difficult IV stick, about the doctor who yelled at me, about all the things they didn't see when they looked at me and decided I wasn't good enough. I told them that every nurse they see, every healthcare worker, is carrying stories like that, is carrying the weight of lives and deaths and suffering and hope. I told them that we don't look perfect because we're too busy doing our jobs to worry about whether our hair is styled or our scrubs are pressed. I told them that the next time they see a tired nurse or doctor or paramedic, maybe they should feel grateful instead of judgmental, because that person has probably been up all night saving lives. They listened to every word. They didn't interrupt. They didn't make excuses. They just listened. And when I finished, they thanked me again, not just for taking care of their friend, but for teaching them something important, for opening their eyes. The blonde woman made it through surgery. It was complicated and took several hours, but she survived. She spent 2 weeks in the ICU, and I wasn't her primary nurse because I was back on my regular floor, but I checked on her when I could. I wanted to make sure she was okay, not because I was trying to prove a point, but because that's what you do. You care about your patients, even the ones who hurt you. When she finally woke up and was coherent enough to have conversations, one of the ICU nurses told me she had been asking about me. She wanted to thank me. She wanted to apologize. So I went to see her during my break one day. She looked so different from that confident, perfectly put-together woman I had seen in the cafeteria. She looked fragile and small and scared, but when she saw me, her eyes filled with tears. She said she was sorry. She said it over and over, like she couldn't say it enough times to make up for what she had done. She said she had no excuse for her behavior, that she had been shallow and mean, and that she was ashamed of herself. She said that lying in that hospital bed, being taken care of by nurses who treated her with kindness and dignity despite how she had acted, had changed her perspective on everything. I told her I forgave her, and I meant it, because holding on to anger and resentment wasn't going to help either of us. She needed to heal, physically and emotionally, and I needed to move forward and keep doing my job. We talked for a while, about life and humility, and how sometimes the worst moments can teach us the most important lessons. When I left her room that day, I felt lighter somehow, like a weight had been lifted. But the story doesn't end there. About a month after she was discharged, something unexpected happened. I was at the nurse's station doing paperwork when one of the administrative staff came up to me with a strange expression on her face. She said there was a delivery for me at the front desk. I couldn't imagine what it could be. I wasn't expecting anything. When I got to the front desk, there was an enormous bouquet of flowers. I'm talking massive, the kind you see at fancy events, with roses and lilies, and all kinds of beautiful blooms I didn't even know the names of. There was a card attached. I opened it with shaking hands, not sure what to expect. The card was from the blonde woman and her friends, the whole group from the cafeteria. They had all signed it. The message said, "Thank you for saving a life. Thank you for being professional when they had been cruel. Thank you for teaching them about compassion and humility." But there was more. At the bottom of the card, there was information about a donation. They had made a substantial donation to the hospital in my name. Not just any donation, but a significant one that would be used to create a fund for nurse education and wellness programs. I stood there in the hospital lobby, holding this card, and I started crying. Not sad tears this time, but tears of something I can't quite describe. Relief, maybe. Validation. A sense that maybe, just maybe, something good had come out of that horrible experience. The front desk staff was looking at me with concern, asking if I was okay, and all I could do was nod and smile through my tears. But even more than the flowers or the donation, what stuck with me was what happened next. Over the following weeks, I started getting messages, emails, cards, even a few phone calls. Some were from the blonde woman's family, thanking me again. But others were from people I didn't know. Apparently, the story had spread. The blonde woman had told people about what had happened, about how she had judged a nurse, and then had her life saved by that same nurse. She had been telling everyone about the lesson she learned, about how we need to treat healthcare workers with more respect and appreciation. Some local news outlet picked up the story. I didn't want to do any interviews because I'm not the kind of person who likes attention, but the story got out there anyway. And suddenly, people were talking about it. about how we treat healthcare workers, about how we judge people without knowing their stories, about how everyone deserves dignity and respect. I started getting thank you cards from random people. Coffee shop workers would refuse to let me pay for my coffee when they recognized me from the news story. Parents would stop me in the grocery store to tell me they had talked to their kids about respecting others. It was overwhelming and humbling, and honestly a little uncomfortable because I didn't think I had done anything special. I had just done my job. I had just been the nurse I was trained to be, but maybe that was the point. Maybe the lesson wasn't just for those people in the cafeteria. Maybe it was for everyone. That healthcare workers, all of us, we're human beings doing an incredibly difficult job. We're saving lives and holding hands and wiping away tears, and sometimes, yes, we look tired. We look messy. We look like we've been through something, because we have been through something. And that doesn't make us any less professional or dedicated or worthy of respect. The blonde woman and I stayed in touch. Not close friends, but we exchange messages sometimes. She sends me updates about her recovery, which has been long and challenging but successful. She tells me about how the experience changed her, how she tries to be more aware of how she treats people, how she volunteers now at a local charity that supports healthcare workers. Her friends, the ones who laughed with her that day, they've reached out too. One of them organized a fundraiser for our hospital. Another one started a program that brings free meals to hospital staff during their night shifts. They were trying to make amends, and while nothing could erase what happened, it was something. It was an acknowledgement that they had been wrong, and a genuine effort to do better. As for me, I'm still a nurse. I still work those long shifts, still come home exhausted, still sometimes question whether I can keep doing this. But now, when I have those moments of doubt, I think about that night in the ER. I think about how I could have let my hurt and anger affect my work, but I didn't. I think about how choosing compassion over revenge, professionalism over pettiness, ended up not just saving a life, but potentially changing several lives, including my own. I think about all the other nurses out there, working through the night, dealing with their own moments of doubt and exhaustion and sometimes disrespect. I hope they know that their work matters. I hope they know that even when it feels like nobody sees them or appreciates them, they are making a difference. I hope they know that they are enough, exactly as they are, wrinkled scrubs and messy hair and all, because at the end of the day, that's what I learned from this whole experience. Not that I needed to prove anything to those people in the cafeteria. Not that I needed their validation or their apologies or their donations. What I learned was that I already knew my own worth. I already knew that what I do matters. And no amount of mockery or disrespect could take that away from me unless I let it. I'm sharing this story not because I want sympathy or praise. I'm sharing it because I think it's important for people to understand what healthcare workers go through. The physical exhaustion, yes, but also the emotional toll, the way we carry our patients' pain with us, the way we sometimes absorb disrespect and judgment and keep going anyway because lives depend on us. And I'm sharing it because I want people to think twice before they judge someone based on their appearance, before they make assumptions about someone's dedication or professionalism based on how tired they look or how messy their clothes are. You don't know what that person has been through. You don't know what battles they're fighting. You don't know what lives they might have saved just hours before you saw them. So the next time you see a healthcare worker who looks exhausted, maybe just say thank you. Or better yet, don't say anything. Just treat them with the basic human dignity that everyone deserves. Because I promise you, they're doing the best they can. They're showing up, day after day, night after night, giving everything they have to take care of people they've never met before. And that deserves respect, not mockery. If you've made it this far in my story, thank you for listening. Thank you for taking the time to understand what it's really like behind these scrubs, behind these tired eyes, behind these hands that shake sometimes from exhaustion, but never from lack of commitment. We're all just trying to do our best in this world, and sometimes our best doesn't look perfect, but it's enough. It's always been enough. If this story touched your heart or made you think differently about the people who take care of you when you're at your most vulnerable, I'd love for you to subscribe to this channel. Leave a comment below telling me about a time when you or someone you know was judged unfairly, or about a healthcare worker who made a difference in your life. And please, watch the next video, because I have more stories to share, more truths to tell, more moments that shaped who I am today. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. And remember, we're all carrying invisible battles. Let's treat each other with the kindness and respect we all deserve.